Pot Roast is in the building.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am Brian Smith, longtime college football recruiting analyst and writer. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. I truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today's show has a lot of information because the assistant coaches hired by Florida State had their press conferences. Obviously, I'm going to talk about Pot Roast here in just a minute, but we're also going to get to Duce Robinson. He's making a visit later this week. I have some interesting takes on who, what, when, where, and why, and how. I think that's going to go down. I also have an opinion about how some of the so-called journalists are getting information on breaking some of these stories about who's committing where out of the portal that you will find interesting because it's, in my opinion, a little shady. And we're also going to talk about the other guys coming to Florida State, all their press conferences. So we got a jam-packed Locked On Seminoles, but we are starting with Pot Roast. So what is the background of Terence Knighton, the new defensive line coach for the Noles, getting that nickname? I want to get this out of the way first because I think this is a great story. And I forget the person who asked it in the press conference. Somebody said, hey, can you give us the backdrop? I don't know how you really got the name. Terrance said, this is the true story here. When he was playing for the Jags, he had a game in Seattle and had to fly back across country 5-6 hours, whatever it was. He said he ordered pot roast on the plane. Well, one of the guys heard the person bringing the meal out to Terrance say pot roast, and he said, hey, that's for me. And his teammate heard it. And he said, this is the guy on the team that was the practical joker, blah, blah, blah. Next day, they had media, and he's sitting there, and he sees that guy come up. He's like, oh, here we go. He knew. And that guy said to all the media, this is Pot Roast. That's his new nickname, blah, blah, blah. So that's the real story besides what's probably bandied about in a million different ways. He said something about how there's the report that he ate all the pot roast on the plane. He goes, that is not true. And I thought that was pretty funny. But anyway, listening to his press conference, a couple of quick notes. Number one, immediately gave respect to Odell Haggins. I love that. He's one of the all-time great defensive line coaches in college football history. He's a Florida State legend. And by all accounts, from all the recruits and people I've ever spoken to, Odell Haggins is just a good man. So I was really glad to hear that. Number two, he went out of his way to thank everybody for coming. Sometimes coaches kind of look down at media. Obviously, I work in media, so I respect that. That's cool. And then finally, this is something that I thought was interesting. Maybe it was the first or second question. Why'd you pick Florida State? Why'd you take the risk coming here? You know, they're coming off a 2-10 season. And he said, immediately, Florida State is the pinnacle of college football. He respects the place that he's at. Here's why that's important. Florida State needs coaches that believe in the foundation of the people that are around them, the buildings that they represent, the names on them, all the statues, Bowden, Dion, Warwick Dunn, anybody that's played there. Terrance gets it. He's done his history, his research, and his overall due diligence. That cannot be understated. Florida State needs those kind of people because the ground that they walk upon, they love it. I think Terence Knighton is one of those guys. Also was talking about he wants to attack. You know, if you're going to define my defense, we want guys that really get after it and want to go after the other team, be aggressive. That'll never go out of style with me. I love that. In respect to Darrell Jackson Jr.'s decision to come back, he openly admitted, in his own words, he said, we got the number one guy out of the portal. Obviously, it wasn't really in the portal because he declared for the draft, but the point is still taken. Pot Roast was referring to Darrell Jackson's ability. He talked about he's one of the biggest human beings he's ever seen. You know, Darrell 6'6", 330, whatever he is. And he's got a good relationship with him already. He's only known him a few days, so that's a great sign that he can recruit. I'll talk about that more in a moment. And it's also something that he's excited about because he thinks he's got a world of talent. And he also, again, brought up Odell Haggins and said he's got him to this point. Now I just want to keep adding to it, blah, blah, blah. Like he went out of his way to give Odell credit, not once, but twice. Props. I really like that. As for the most complex part of the conversation, and it had to happen, I'm fascinated with it. And I think that, to be honest, Terence Knighton did a great job of defining this. Somebody said, how do you describe the 3-3-5, the D lineman and how it works. And to be clear, before I even answered, I'm thinking to myself, he could do a 6-hour seminar. This is not the time or place, but you got to give some kind of answer. And he just put it in perspective. He said, look, with our package that we have on the field, whatever the personnel is, you can run a play in base 3-3-5. On the next play, you can run something totally different. Maybe it's 4-man line. I'll just use my own example, double eagle, which means you got 3 down linemen. You bring up both outside linebackers, and they're going to come off the edge. It's a 50 look, if you will. There's different personnel types you can go with here. But you don't have to change your personnel between plays. So in short, on every single play, if you want it to be, the 3-3-5 allows you the ability to morph into something else, but you're in the huddle just like you would any other time. Before the snap, you may be kind of in a muddle huddle. Some guys, maybe the corners go out or something, but your line doesn't show anything until they're lined up. You're always at an advantage when the other team is worried that you're going to show them something they're not prepared for. But in addition to that, Florida State's sitting there looking at it like, well, we have our base package in. We're going to go 50 front on this play on 2nd and 5. We haven't run it all year. You're going against Clemson, Miami, somebody, some big bowl game, whatever it is, Georgia Tech, somebody that runs something complex. You try to steer it away from what they're normally seeing, but you didn't substitute, so they're not ready for it. When you have flexible personnel, then you can do flexible play calls and fronts. The 3-3-5 is a much more complex. I mean, it's worlds apart from a 4-3 base, and it takes longer to learn overall. But again, you can just work with the personnel that you have and make it work. And that's what Terence Knighton's statement was about. And I thought it was brilliant that he just broke it down in real simple. I know I expanded way beyond what I originally thought I was going to do. But again, opposing teams won't know what's coming, even if Florida State has its quote-unquote base package on the field. They can change on any given play. And on a quick audible from the inside linebacker or whatever, maybe comes up and taps somebody on the hip and says, move over, go from a 1-tech to a 2-tech, or go into even front, whatever. They can do different things because the body types allow them to do it. It's a really unique defense, and I'm curious to see what Coach White, Coach Knight, and everybody comes up with across the front, because I think they're going to really mess with teams as long as they're in Tallahassee. Next, and this is more the fun side of Terence Knighton. He is a very big social media guy. Somebody brought it up, and I went while the press conference was going on, and I click on his X profile. He's got like 47,000 followers. That's a lot. And it says CEO of Death Row South. And I'm like, okay, so he likes Death Row Records, but now he's obviously in Tallahassee. So he just kind of mixed it together. And then he even mentioned Death Row South is in the building. And if you're not into rap or don't know anything about it, Death Row Records, Snoop Dogg, and a bunch of people from that era came from that. But that's Dr. Dre and Eazy-E and a bunch of different people that were a part of all that kind of stuff. Suge Knight. And I think he just likes to have fun with it. And it's part of his personality. He is a really fun personality, upbeat, happy about everything. Even talking about Death Row Records in passing on his X profile, you can tell when he talks about it, everything's just in playful fun. And that goes to one of my favorite topics, recruiting. Whether it's Daryl Jackson to keep him from going to the National Football League, whether it's trying to get somebody like Williams, who I'm going to talk about in just a second, or it's a recruit in 2026 that's visiting or something like in January. I'm sure they'll have plenty in January for junior days. I think this is a personality that's going to work well at Florida State, or really anywhere he goes. Now to Williams. Because of the personality and the connection, Williams is the defensive end / stand-up backer, pass rusher. I don't know what they're going to call it at Florida State, but he's the guy, they called it the Jack at Nebraska. Again, I don't know what they'll call it at FSU, that they got to get. He's probably going to decide the next 48 hours, according to Noles 24/7. He's canceled a couple visits. I think it looks really good for Florida State. To me, because he's got 2 years of eligibility and it's a critical position, he's the number one guy on the board. 6'6", 250, proven pass rusher, has a history with a 3-3-5. He admits that he knows the scheme well, obviously knows Knighton, obviously knows Tony White. So that personality, I think, is going to help bring that in, and that's huge. And it would be 2 for 2 for him. You keep a nose guard that's got NFL talent, and add one from Nebraska that's got insane talent too. Florida State's already doing pretty well with Terence Knighton. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the other coaches And we're going to get into the Duce Robinson news and a little bit of shenanigans on how some of these stories are broke. That is next on Locked On Seminoles. It's that time of year. The college football playoff is back. And with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the college football playoff begins December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern. Leading into our first matchup, SMU Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then, the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate live, TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. As for the other coaches, I've got history with a couple of them, but one I do not, and he's the one I want to start with because I had no idea. Honestly, I had no idea what to expect, and I thought it was kind of interesting because when you look at Florida State historically, they've got a lot of personalities and a lot of people that are deeply religious. They've got guys that are great recruiters. They got guys that are like Mickey Andrews was an X's and O's guys and real fiery. They've got all kinds of personalities. Evan Cooper, I can see why he's been a good recruiter. He's a guy that's from South Florida. He told everybody that he's from an FSU family. For those of you that are older like me, I didn't know this. He said Chevin Smith, who was a walk-on for Florida State in the mid-'90s, he played at Miami Southridge, famous program in the Miami Public League, ended up leaving Florida State with like an economics degree. I did not know that. He said like his whole family follows the Noles religiously, watches the games and all that. So it was a big deal for him to come to Florida State. And again, he's got the connections to South Florida. That's never a bad thing. And he plans on recruiting it hard. Yeah, he wants the length, the speed and all that, but he wants guys that they've got some kind of background in zone or man. He talked about needing both. So I think you're going to see a little more of a morphosis into a widespread defense from play to play that's harder, especially for younger quarterbacks, to project on any one given play what the Noles are going to operate. Obviously, Surtain and the group they had this past year, they really were man heavy, and that's fine. But it's easier to get picks when you fool teams and there's an overthrow or they don't see a safety that's breaking on the ball. That's where more picks come from. You take away throws and avenues a little bit easier with man, but there's more high risk down the field. So I'm curious to see what they do. But Evan Cooper admitted, like, I'm just getting to know the guys, got to find out what their strengths and weaknesses are, and then we'll move from there, which I like. Here's why. You don't want to force something into someone into a really hard spot for them. If they're better at man, play them in situations or in games more, give them more snaps when you're playing a team that it benefits you to play more man, and vice versa with zone. He didn't, I hate this, and I'm glad he didn't do this. He didn't say, this is what we're going to run. Everybody's got to do it. This is our way, and this is it. I hate those coaches. He's talking about adaptability, not only for the players, but for himself. Now, some guys are going to play more because they have more length or have more speed, like a Kai Bates. He's got a world of talent, and he's a hitter. They'll figure him out all across the board. I know him, really intelligent kid who's close to 4.0 GPA, and he loves football. He's a guy that, if you don't remember the story, cut part of his finger off during his senior year because he wanted to go back in the game. Like, he wanted to play again. He's that dude. I think that there's a lot of different players at Florida State that Evan's going to like, but the DB room in general has a lot of talent. Now they just got to figure out who goes where. I wouldn't be surprised if a corner played some safety, safety played some corner, do different things. Because if you're going to play zone, and this includes the nickel spot, I think it opens up more flexibility as a staff. Again, there's no shortcut on this. The players got to learn the zone stuff because it's more complex. That'll take care of itself in spring ball. Just got to see who does the due diligence on their side to learn it, then execute it in practice. But the upside is very, very high by doing this. As for him overall, well-spoken, very confident, very respectful, very laid back. Like this personality, I think the recruiting is going to be good. Let's see. Quote that he mentioned as far as the current roster and what he wants going forward. This is a great quote. Any defensive coach should look at it this way, in my opinion. I want guys that can play in space. Basically, to me, and you can take this for however you want, I want guys that can make tackles when it's just that player against the opposing team's ball carrier. Got to have that confidence because you're going to get beat sometimes. There are guys like, do you think it was fun for opposing teams to tackle Ja'Kai Douglas? Probably not. Think about all the really shifty running backs that Florida State's had, or somebody like Jordan Travis. It's horrible, but you still got to have guys that have that confidence to do it. And I think he was talking about not just the physical capabilities, but Coach Cooper was talking about the mentality that I can go do it, I can learn, and I can get better. And he likes helping them. He said he's a servant to the players. I thought that was interesting. So he's a really good dude. As far as Coach White, he said he's even keel, likes working with him. He says, I know what I'm going to get with him every day, and it's pretty easy to understand his message. I thought that was important. Surtain, he said he's a really cool guy. They're both from South Florida. He knows him. He's excited about working with him. And as far as just the players in general, it's a common DB phrase as far as DB coaches go. He wants length. He wants flexibility. I mean, everybody wants that, so that's not surprising. But I was really impressed with Coach Cooper. He seems like a pretty good dude. Next, I've talked about Tim Harris Jr. at length because I know him, and I didn't need to hear him speak, but I listened to it. But he said something at the beginning that I thought was fantastic, and I was happy to hear it, and I'm sure Florida State fans are too. As far as his receivers go, he goes, we need people that catch the football with an elite ability. Amen to that. Because Florida State sucked at it last year. It was not fun to cover, watch, or otherwise be a part of. Communication with current players. He went out of his way to talk to the players already to get to know them. He thought that was the right thing to do so they knew who he was, talk about what they can do, etc. That's a good sign. He obviously knows Malzahn well. He's known Malzahn since his days as the head coach at Booker T. Washington and down in Miami. And he talked about he's interviewed with him before, then he ended up coaching with him later. He didn't get the first job, but they've got a great relationship. He also brought up something as an answer that was interesting. Somebody talked about, well, Surtain, what's it going to be like having your receivers go against his DBs? And he said he was really looking forward to that because it'll make guys better. Iron sharpens iron. Do not forget that. As far as Boggs, the guy coming in from Cocoa, he said he's got a lot of gifts, but most importantly, he kept getting better. All through his freshman year, he was good. Sophomore year, we're like, okay. Junior year, he was tremendous. Then his senior year, he was part of the state championship run. And it's an incredible story for Boggs because he just makes catches. He's always open. He just tried to explain that and what it's like to get a guy like him because he's got great hands and being a part of it. You could tell that Tim Harris Jr. was excited about it. Herb Hand, this is another guy I know. He had a lot to say. Here's just a couple of points about him that I thought were interesting. The offensive line, he said he wants different things with players, but this is what he looks at when he's evaluating portal, high school, whatever. Flexibility, like a literal flexibility in the joints. Hips, knees, are they knee bender, not a hip bender? Do they enjoy the physicality of playing football? You better look at it that way because Herb has worked now. This will be the third time with Gus, Tulsa. Oh, no, wait a minute. Take that back. This will be the fourth place. Tulsa, Auburn, UCF, and now Florida State. They both want to run downhill, play very physical. And then he wants guys that have feet in space. Like you got to be able to screen and you got to be able to get outside on secondary blocks, like outside zone. You may not have somebody lined up in front of you, or you might have a wide 9, kick them out and just go to the next level. Can you block a linebacker in space? He wants guys that are truly athletes, and he thought that was a really important thing. And he also brought up that he has a relationship with some of the players that are on the roster. And he said, ironically, Florida State offensive lineman Jalen Early, when he was at the University of Texas, he was the first guy to offer Jalen Early. So he's got a relationship with him. I thought that was pretty cool. Another comment that I found interesting from Coach Hand, he was talking about the portal because somebody asked him about it. He said, the portal is kind of like speed dating. And I'm like, oh boy, here we go. He said, there's no luxury to get to know a player. And he's right. I commented on the Locked On Seminoles YouTube page. Somebody had asked me a question about Duce Robinson and some other guys. And some of the information just kind of goes really, really fast. There may be a guy that Florida State's looking at that it's not public. I may not even really be in the portal yet because it's not published. He's just done the paperwork. That may go through 24 to 72 hours and it's over. As soon as something's reported an hour later, like there's a graphic from somebody like Hayes Fawcett, because it's over. Like the media have never had a chance. It's not like high school recruiting. So I understand what Coach Hand's talking about. Like, I may know a high school recruit 3-4 years. Like, there's a kid in Texas I knew when he was in eighth grade, that ran a 10.6 100 meters. Like, I know he's going to play in the NFL, and so is everybody else at his high school. Those are the kinds of things I can just build a relationship over, and so can coaches. Lee Hunter, the guy that Florida State's recruiting that went from UCF, now he's in the portal. He's already visited UCF. He might come back later this week. Sounds like he will. Malzahn had told us a long time ago when I was covering UCF, like I knew him from ninth grade that we were recruiting because he was a big guy, played at a prominent program in Mobile. It's just different with the portal, man. Very, very good point. He was also talking about evaluating portal players. This is fascinating to me. He said that he knows most of the O-line coaches. So when he sees somebody, he can go check out their character and talk to that coach. Hey, what did he do good? What did he do bad on and off the field? That's also very, very smart. Very, very smart. All right. When we come back, we're going to have the portal news, some Duce Robinson news, and wrap up this episode of Locked on Seminoles. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win that $5 bet. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can break out or check out the latest stats, live play-by-play, and so much more where you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Here's my little Duce Robinson update. There's another Noles 24/7 thing talking about he's going to visit Friday, and they'd interviewed Dominic Robinson. I remember interviewing Dominic a long time ago. Like his son, he was a national recruit. He was out of Diamond Bar, California, signed with the Noles, played DB for a while, moved to receiver, etc. Really good player coming out of high school. Didn't have quite the college and pro career that I thought he would, but anyway, he wants this kid to go to Florida State. You could tell by the interview. Sinone, one of the guys at 24/7, put in a crystal ball for the Noles to get him. Duce, that is. And I thought it was interesting. I'm like, man, he's got Arizona State's after him. He played high school ball in Arizona State. They're hot. They're in the playoff. I know he's got a lot of guys calling. I'm not even worried about his list publicly because this could drag on a while. Duce, in my opinion, is the top receiver in the portal because you can't teach 6'6". I know the kid from being around him at Elite 11. He's got the personality that everybody gravitates to. Very competitive. Like, he went to the Elite 11 finals and shagged balls. He was offered by every school in the country. Everybody else out there pretty much that were receivers, there's one or two others that were recruited. Like out of the 30 guys out there, there were like 2 guys that were being recruited. They didn't have to be there. Duce is the kind of guy you want on your team. I think it's interesting that Florida State's the leader and they're coming to the end of the week. The dad's coming in with him on Thursday night. He wants Florida State to be lit and get his kid there. But it sounds like he's going to let his kid make his own decision. I have no insight. I haven't talked to Duce in forever. But I think this is premature to say he's going anywhere because there's a long way to go with this. And I have a feeling because he's got 2 years eligibility left technically. He's probably going to play 1 more year and turn pro. But it's going to cost a pretty penny. So here's my question. How much is Duce Robinson worth, especially in a Norvell offense where you're going to throw more vertical on his history as well as Gus Malzahn? And he's good on back shoulder fades, posts, go routes, jump balls, the whole nine. Because he's honestly got really good hand-eye coordination. But how much money is he worth? Is he $1 million guy? What is he worth? Because I think Florida State's going to have to pay a lot. I think a 7-figure salary for whoever gets him is likely. This will be fascinating to me where Duce Robinson ends up, Florida State or otherwise, because it's not just the money. You got to have a fit and all that stuff, but you're not going to get outbid by $300,000-$400,000 and expect to get a kid either. This is why the portal now, in conjunction with NIL, is truly fascinating. I have no way to project where he's going to go. I wouldn't be surprised if he signed with the Noles, but Arizona State could make him the one guy, especially he played in Arizona again. That's important. That's an important thing, man. He could be a local hero in Phoenix and go to ASU because it's in Tempe, which is a part of the greater Phoenix community. That's very difficult. So we'll see how that goes. Finally, just wanted to add one more thing. I was talking to a friend of mine in the writing business today, in the school he covers, prominent program. I'll leave it at that. And I'd asked him about a guy that had announced for the school he covers, and the person that published it and how they got it. I knew there was something off because it was out of the blue. I'm usually in tune with what's going on with this school, and through some of the writers, him in particular, he hadn't said anything to me about it. And I was like, what's going on there? Why did it happen like that? I knew something was off. And he said, well, they got the inside information. I said, let me guess. Some of these writers, who a lot of us have contacts in the coaching world, they got somebody's username and password for the transfer portal. And once you're in the actual system the NCAA has, how it works, you sign up for school A. Hey, I'm leaving school like Texas Tech or whatever, Houston, LSU, and I'm going to school B, whatever that school is. Well, this player had signed, but he didn't publish anything. He didn't give the go-ahead for anybody, but somebody saw it in the portal because they had access to it, and they just went ahead and published it. Excuse me. Two things. Number one, it's wrong to publish something like that without the kid's consent. Two, it's underhanded to try to dupe everybody like that because everybody that covered this even knew about it. And they were just told not to say anything yet, and then they did it anyway. I can guarantee you from being in the media, that will not end well for a lot of guys that do this in the media. I don't care how much of a rep you have, how big a name you are in your area with the school. When you do that, eventually it will not only bite you, but the organization for which you earn a paycheck. Writers can be scandalous. And maybe there's more to it than that, and maybe we're wrong, and he had the okay on this, but I'm not so sure that's the case. We don't think so. I'll find out more, but again, I want to leave it at that. But just know that there's a lot of reasons that somebody suddenly commits, and they're like, nobody knew about it, but like one person. There are people that have backdoor passes to what's really going on in the portal. It's wild. And it's why a lot of the stuff, because kids want to make their own announcements, they're not in the portal, but they're actively seeking schools and vice versa, is stuff like this. I know there's a handful of kids, I know where they're going, but they're not even in the portal. It's because of stuff like this. It's just the way it works. So with that being said, the portal world is wild, and it gets wilder every day. I'm here to cover it, and I'm here to bring it to Florida State fans. And thank you once again to making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. I truly appreciate you stopping to talk some Noles with me. If you have not already, please hit that like button, that notification bell, and subscribe to the Locked On Seminoles podcast. I truly appreciate it. And if also you could share this podcast so I can get in front of more Florida State fans. I want to inform as many people as I can about recruiting. There's going to be a ton of 7-on-7 stuff coming up. Definitely more portal stuff, coaching news, transfers that are coming in and out, why they're good or why they're not for this school and that school, not just Florida State, but across the board, who the competition's getting. We're going to have a lot of information right here on this channel. Everybody have a good night. I will see you again tomorrow.